You're listening to The Money Hour with your host, Tina Mitchell. Sponsored by Absolute Mortgage, a division of Pinnacle Capital Mortgage Corporation. Now, in the studio, local mortgage and finance expert, Tina Mitchell.
Welcome back to the Money Hour with your host and mortgage expert, Tina Mitchell, right here on 1150 AM KKNW, the Saturday, June 18th show. It's a great day to talk all about money. That's what the show is about and why I'm here and why the guests here are in studio today. How to make money, save money, and build a better quality of life for you and your family. If you're hearing my show at a different time or day, you are listening to a rebroadcast, but you can call the show at 1-855-400-1150. Again, that's 1-855-400-1150 or online at themoneyhour.com. And right now in studio, we're going to have a conversation with Matthew Gardner, Chief Economist for Windermere Services. We're talking about housing affordability and general real estate. Matthew, thank you so much for coming back in studio. I know you're a really busy guy, and it's just always a pleasure to have an expert of your caliber right here sitting across the table from me. So thank you.
You're welcome, Tina. Good to be here again.
A little background about Matthew. He is with Windermere Services as Chief Economist for Windermere Services Company. Matthew is responsible for analyzing and interpreting economic data and its impact on the real estate market in both the local and national level. He has over 25 years of professional experience both in the U.S. and the U.K. Matthew chairs the Board of Trustee at the Washington Center of Real Estate Research in the University of Washington, sits on the Urban Land Institute's Technical Assistance Panel, is an advisory board member for the Runstad Center for Real Estate Studies at the University of Washington, where he also lectures in real estate forecasting. So talking about the housing affordability in general real estate, Matthew, can you explain to my listeners how to define the housing affordability?
Well, affordability, you look at it several different ways, which is actually what makes it kind of interesting. The easiest way to look at it is take let's say the median home price and median income, divide one by the other. That gives you a number. And obviously the higher the number, the less affordable a market is. So, for example, in King County, it's about 5.7, which basically means we are very unaffordable. Yeah, that's kind of an arbitrary way to look at it. I think there's lots of other, and I think better ways and better matrices to look at it. National Association of Realtors always come out with their own index, and it's an index number. Above 100, you're affordable. Below, you're not. And by the way they calculate it, we are. Now, you can argue that depending on which market you're in. I actually prefer the Home Builders Index. That actually says what percentage of households in a market can actually afford a median-priced home and a home sold during that period. And for the US, it's about 65%. So across the country, it's great. Not so good if you talk about our local area here, where it's about 50%. Now, that's in line with the 10-year trend, but you have to remember that interest rates now are a lot lower than they were. So as they start moving up, which I believe they will, it'll become tougher and tougher and more expensive, and we will become ultimately more unaffordable.
Yes.
There are great markets. If you want to live in Illinois or West Virginia, remarkably affordable. If you want to live in California, pretty much most of it, no, you're not.
Yes,
yes.
So it's not so bad here when we look at the affordability.
Compare us, if you were to look at, let's say, San Francisco, about 10.5% of households can afford a medium-priced house.
Wow, that is crazy.
That's 1 in 10. It's a remarkably low number, and I think that's going to cause some problems down the road.
Yes.
But I think when you think things in the bigger picture, what keeps me up at night really is housing affordability.
Yeah.
We got to that point where we've moved dramatically in terms of upward pressure on pricing. That's causing a lot of angst for buyers out there, certainly.
Yes.
I'm sure we'll be talking about that a bit later on. But affordability is a problem, and you tend to find it drops down in markets which have certain barriers to them, both natural as well as political. Here, of course, in the Puget Sound, it's great. We have lots of mountains, lots of water. Well, that limits your land supply. So limit supply, have new demand, prices go up. And then, of course, we also have political constraints as well in growth boundaries where you can, where you cannot build. Those things in concert make it an expensive market. And so certainly that's something I think we need to start addressing as we go forward in time, because At some point or another, I don't want this market to become unaffordable for everybody.
Yes. So, Matthew, when you talk about, because that's a shocking in the California market at a 10%, how do their properties continue to appreciate when they have 10% that are able to afford housing?
Few very, very high-paid jobs. So you go to Santa Clara, San Francisco, you've got a median income there probably in that $140,000 to $160,000 range compared to us here where it's about $90,000. That certainly helps.
Yes.
But it does mean an awful lot more people rent than own.
Yes, of course.
The median sales price in the Bay Area last quarter was about $1.2 million.
Wow.
And it was it's half of that in the Puget Sound.
Yeah. And it's kind of exciting when you look at that because we, being Port Rim City, we follow our other Port Rim cities and always just a step behind. So you can see we are definitely a step behind. So Matthew, how do we compare the other markets in the U.S.?
Well, we're kind of middle of the road. So I think over time what you're going to find is that people are going to start migrating. They're going to move from the middle part of America to both coasts and the Southwest. As we get older, we're going to move into the warmer climes. Both coasts are going to do remarkably well. So we're seeing upward pressure on pricing here. We are in Oregon. Obviously, we've already seen it in California.
Yep.
On the other side, you're certainly seeing it in New York. Again, one of the least affordable housing markets. Yet Washington, D.C., not so much.
Yes.
Blame the government or not. But
another conversation.
Yeah, exactly. As you go further down into Florida, to a degree still affordable, but that's certainly changing. So I think over time, what you're going to need to look at is where are the markets that are growing economically? That's the most important thing.
Okay.
So if we're creating jobs, you create demand for housing.
Yes.
If you're not creating jobs, you're not.
Yes.
So in markets like ours, I think we're remarkably lucky today. We've really diversified away from, let's say, relying where Boeing went, which is very much what we did in the 70s and the 80s. We diversified, but we diversified into dot-coms. Again, not the smartest move known to man. And that meant that our 2000 recession was actually remarkably hard. But as we diversify, we actually broaden that employment base. That's going to be good. However, and there's always going to be another but because I'm an economist, and the but is right now Amazon.com. Amazon's employment is just frenetic.
Yeah.
So you look at the urban markets, they're employing several thousand people a month, it feels like. That's also driving that market. Now, will they continue? Well, we all probably have Amazon Prime memberships,
yes.
but I think that I'm a little bit concerned by that.
Okay, all right. So, Matthew, what about, why home prices here rise at a faster rate than many of the other markets around the country? And we talked about employment. Are there any other reasons that for that? Yeah.
As I mentioned earlier on, we've really kind of got these constraints, these land constraints. And let's say if you look at the Puget Sound, it said a lot of water, a lot of mountains. So our land supply is already finite, unlike, let's say, Houston, whereby you basically kind of keep on building as far as the eye can see. You can't do that here. Secondarily, and again, it's the point which I mentioned, which is growth management, urban growth boundaries. We've defined where you can and where you cannot build. And that, I think, to a degree makes sense. I mean, we don't want to see a lot of sprawl, similar to, let's say, Phoenix, when you basically kind of land in Phoenix Airport, for example, and the rooftops and swimming pools as far as the eye can see.
Yeah.
We don't want that. We don't like it. However, at some point in time, we need to start considering these boundaries and whether they are still appropriate or not. If they are, then perhaps we need to consider some adjustments in zoning. And certainly we're finding that in Seattle right now with the HALA group that the mayor's created. So I think that we're at that point, we're at that inflection point, where if we want to make sure there's housing for everybody, not necessarily ownership, but it's housing in general that's not remarkably overpriced. Because what happens when you see prices go up to a degree, that means people have to live further and further out.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they have these wonderful 2 and 3 hour commutes.
Yep.
Which is certainly not great.
And when we get to the 2030, then we'll have some nice sound transit stuff going on, but that's a ways away before we're going to hit that.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, if you want to figure out housing affordability and house prices, fully fund mass transit. If you do that, it fixes a lot of issues.
Totally agree.
But I also don't want to wait until 2040 for that to happen.
Yeah. Okay, I was 10 years off to 2040. What about the millennials? When are they going to start buying?
The millennial question is one that comes up an awful lot. For a long time, people were saying, millennials are never going to buy. They're going to be perma-renters. I totally disagree with that then, and I totally disagree with it now.
Okay.
What they are doing is they are delaying buying, delaying home ownership. And why are they doing that? For the better part, they're getting married later in life. They're also having children later in life. If you think about it, right now, they're renting these wonderful downtown apartments, living the dream. But when they start having children, are they going to raise their kids in that environment? No, they're not. They are going to move out and they are going to buy. A survey that's done recently said that 75% of millennials said that buying a home was one of their ultimate goals. But 78% said they think they'd have a hard time qualifying. That I think is what's holding them back.
Whereas a good portion of a majority would not have an issue. It's just a perception.
Exactly. So they do want to buy, and they will. They're just putting it off by a few years. But there are a lot of hindrances. One of those hindrances certainly is qualifying. Where the needle has moved from the sublime in 2006, where essentially have a heartbeat, get a mortgage, through to where we are right now, whereby FICO scores close to 800 and 20% down. The down payment's a problem for them. Do they pay high rents? They can't save.
Yeah.
They've also got an awful lot of student debt, a remarkably large amount of student debt. They have to continue to service. So all those things together, plus the fact the proverbial bank of mum and dad is not picking up the phone very often anymore to help out with down payments.
Yeah.
So will they buy? Yes, they will. They are just delaying it by a couple of years, but do believe me, they do want to buy. The one issue, however, today is lack of supply and lack of inventory.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's where the real issue is. And if you are, thinking about purchasing and thinking that you can't do it, really, talk with a mortgage professional and find out, because there are so many options that people are not aware of that are available. So interest rates. I mean, I know, Matthew, you've got to get this question a zillion times just in one working day. What's going to happen with them? Are you worried about interest rates going up?
No. Two-phase question. Are interest rates going to go up? Yes,
of course.
They are. I've been saying that. I've been saying that for 2 years, and
Yes.
for 2 years I've been wrong.
Yes, me too, Matthew. Mine's been longer than 2 years.
Right. So they are, and I think we'll get into the 4% range.
Yep.
Shortly. Probably later on this year, maybe into early next year. Will be probably 4.4% by the end of 2017. We'll hit 5% in 2018. So they are going to go up, but the increase is really going to be very, very marginal.
Yeah.
So yes, we will see an increase. However, if you look at where the yield on the 10-year Treasury was today, it's dropping down. That actually means I think we'll actually see some downward pressure on mortgage rates before we see some upward pressure. So ultimately, we're likely to retest our historic lows. Yeah,
it's just it's crazy that this now is definitely considered the norm. I mean, where these rates are at, it is our new normal, and the new normal has got to go away at some point.
And that's the scary part, specifically when it comes to millennials, because millennials have never seen interest rates of 10 or 20% that we all remember.
Yes.
So you say to them, you've got to pay 5%. They think it's egregious.
Yep.
It's why am I paying that much money?
Yes.
So it's clearly not the case. But they are going to go up, but the increase will be very modest. It will actually help taper price growth, which I think is ultimately going to be a good thing. But the move up is going to be slow and steady. It's certainly not going to be rapid in any way, shape, or form.
Yes. To wrap up my time here with you, Matthew, I want to ask, the economy can't keep growing forever. So is a recession on the horizon? And if there is, how will it affect the housing market?
The great R word. Recessions, you mentioned it now, the term recession, everyone just gets paralyzed with fear. Because they think back to what happened 2007, 2008. Recessions happen.
Yes.
I want to get T-shirts printed that say that. Because and they do. So are we going to see another one? Yes, I believe we are. My forecast right now is probably late 2018, early 2019, we'll see a business cycle recession. It's okay. We've had 47 recessions since 1776. So they do happen. It'll be fairly mild, fairly modest. It might be a bit longer than average. It might last about a year. But it wouldn't be nothing like the recession that we saw. Now, its effect on real estate, I can go back to recessions since the 60s. What we've really seen in all of them, other than the Great Recession, was that price growth slowed. It didn't turn negative, it slowed. And that's what I would expect to see going forward. So, but it will be a very classic recession as we would expect to see them. And they do happen about every 8 years, historically speaking. We will see it. Is it anything to be worried about when it comes to real estate? No, but it will not be a real estate-driven recession.
Got it. Yeah. Matthew, thank you so much. It's never the quantity of time I have to spend with you, but it definitely is the quality of time. So I appreciate so much, again, your wealth of information, joining me in studio, and look forward to having you back here as soon as you can fit it in your calendar.
Thanks, Tina. Great talking to you again.
Coming up next to the Money Hour, we are going to talk about personal development, uncovering your purpose, a little bit of goals, visions, dreams, intentions, resolutions, objectives, and aspirations with Deborah Trapin, owner of D11 Consulting, right here on 1150 AM KKNW after this short break.